Before there was light, there was listening. Before there was heaven, there was breath. And before creation ever dared to sing, the void had already learned how to hear. From that stillness came a tremor. Not thunder, not motion, but awareness. The first echo shaped itself into a voice, and the voice declared, "Let there be meaning." And the cosmos obeyed. Stars erupted like syllables. Time began as a sentence without punctuation. Every atom vibrated with the memory of that first word, but sound never exists alone. For every vibration, there must be something to receive it. And deep beyond creation, where no light had traveled and no name had been spoken, the silence stirred. It did not answer. It did not refuse. It simply was. Two truths, opposite yet inevitable, one to speak, one to end the need to speak. The word rose as brilliance, woven from scripture and thunder. The silence sat as shadow, shaped like mercy and absence. And in the space between sound and stillness, the arena awoke, not of stone, not of matter, but of meaning itself. Every thought became geometry. Every whisper became light. The first duel was not of swords or flesh. It was between the need to create and the right to stop. And when their eyes met, all of existence leaned in to listen. There was no light, no color, no movement, only an endless expanse of almost. The void stretched without direction, without intention, like a canvas that had never known a hand. Yet within that blank infinity, something waited. Not a being, not even awareness. Merely the possibility that one day there might be awareness. Then it trembled. It wasn't sound, not yet, but the idea of sound. A ripple in nothingness, the first itch of self-recognition. The void realized that it existed, and in that realization, it broke its own perfection. That break was the first word. It did not come from lips or lungs. It was not language, but law, vibration given meaning. And in that vibration, the form of God appeared. He did not stand. He resonated. His body was made of intervals and frequencies, a figure carved from hymn and thunder. When he moved, galaxies bloomed like sparks shaken from a burning harp. His voice filled the void and made it visible. Let there be meaning. And there was. Color burst into being, unrolling across the blank canvas like spilled radiance. Blue unfolded into distance. Gold became purpose. White became memory. The first stars ignited to the rhythm of his heartbeat. Each beat was an instruction, a promise that the universe could be understood. Yet, even as creation took shape, a shadow formed behind the light. The echo of his word curved back upon itself and found resistance, not defiance, but balance. A soft pulse, perfectly opposite, that swallowed each vibration the moment it was born. From that counterpoint, silence took form. It did not shine, because light would have implied intention. It simply was, calm, vast, unmeasured. From it stepped the shape of the Buddha, not the human sage of temples, but the cosmic stillness that wears no name. He opened his eyes, and their gaze erased distance. Around him, the stars slowed. The waves of sound that filled the void hesitated, uncertain. The light that had once stretched forever began to fold, curling inward like petals, returning to their stem. Where the word had said become, the silence whispered be still. And for the first time, creation hesitated between doing and being. God beheld the still figure before him. The vibration of his being dimmed to a questioning hum. You are the absence of me, he said, not as accusation but wonder. The Buddha's voice was not a sound. It was a pause, a reply that arrived without noise. And in that pause, every star flickered, unsure which master to follow, the call or the release. The arena awoke around them. It had no walls, no floor, no ceiling. It was the space between opposites, where meaning goes to decide whether to exist. The ground shimmered with patterns of geometry that rearranged themselves with every thought. Towers of sound rose and fell like living organs. Rivers of light flowed and froze as time forgot its purpose. In that newborn domain, the word and the silence stood opposed, two forces carved from the same wound in nothingness. God raised his hand. From his palm erupted language, shapes of light, each syllable a law. You are void, he declared, and void devours meaning. Yet meaning must be. The Buddha looked at the storm of words swirling toward him and simply breathed. Each exhale unwrote 1,000 letters. The winds died at his feet, dissolving into still air. Meaning must end, he said softly, though no sound escaped. The statement rippled through the arena. Galaxies blinked on and off, unable to decide which truth defined them. God's eyes shone like two suns caught in a song. If all ends, why begin? Because, said the silence, beginning is the illusion that you need an end. The void trembled again. Between their opposing truths, creation wavered like a flame caught between two breaths. Stars shuddered, oceans of light evaporated. From their footsteps grew the first paradox, the soil of all thought. God stepped forward, his aura flaring gold and white. Choirs of newly born angels spiraled out of his presence, each singing fragments of his name. Every note forged a new horizon. Buddha closed his eyes. From his stillness came countless reflections, illusions of himself seated in perfect meditation. They formed a living mandala that expanded outward, absorbing every echo. Sound met stillness. Every vibration the angels sang struck the mandala and returned as silence. Every silence he offered came back as song. The arena pulsed with the rhythm of contradiction. To the angels it was war, to the Buddhas it was balance. And at the center, the two origin forces watched one another with recognition. Not hatred, but something more intimate, inevitability. God's voice deepened, filling the void like thunder shaped by compassion. You would unmake what I am. The Buddha's eyes opened, calm, infinite, sorrowful. You would make what need not be. The words hung between them, vibrating until reality itself began to hum in harmony. The arena expanded, vast enough to contain both light and its absence. Beings of thought were born and died in a heartbeat, their existence the byproduct of dialogue. Galaxies bent like reeds in wind. At last the two forces paused. God's radiance dimmed to a softer glow, and he looked upon the still figure with something close to admiration. Perhaps we are the same syllable, he said, spoken in two directions. The Buddha inclined his head. Perhaps, but which of us is the echo? The question was a seed, and the seed took root. All of creation leaned closer to hear the answer, but the answer did not come. Instead, the tremor of the first sound returned, deeper now, a heartbeat of existence itself. The word vibrated, and silence absorbed it. And from their meeting arose a third presence, thought, neither light nor shadow, but the rhythm between them. The arena glowed with soft white fire, the newborn pulse of consciousness spreading outward through galaxies. Every mind that would ever think, human, angelic, alien, divine, was born from that meeting. God watched it unfold, eyes wet with light. So this is what happens when creation listens. The Buddha smiled faintly. And when silence allows it, for a moment, they stood not as enemies, but as harmony. The sound and its stillness finally understanding that neither could exist alone. But harmony, like all things, cannot last. The fire of awareness grew hungry. Thought desired definition. Definition demanded difference. The pulse began to divide again into dualities, sound and void, life and death, yes and no. And so, even before their first battle ended, the next began. God lifted his gaze. Then let us speak again. The Buddha closed his eyes. And let me listen. The arena thrummed, a cathedral of paradox ready to echo their truths once more. The first sound had been spoken. The first silence had been heard. An existence blessed, cursed, magnificent began. The arena dreamed itself awake. After the first sound and the first stillness came something new. The motion of thinking. It began as a tremor that did not shake space, but meaning. The laws that God had spoken in the beginning, and the quiet mercy that Buddha had offered in answer, now swirled together. A storm made of questions. Out of that storm, the void began to sculpt itself. Where there had been only the hum of contradiction, now appeared form. Mountains rose, not of stone, but of geometry. Oceans of light unfolded like pages of an unfinished scripture. Words, having grown restless, sought bodies to inhabit. Silence, refusing to be outnumbered, turned those bodies transparent, ghost-like, visible and invisible in alternating rhythm. Thus was born the arena of thought. Every idea here existed exactly as long as it was believed. Every doubt erased what belief had built. At the center, two figures faced one another again, the word and the silence. God stood upon the shining threshold of his own imagination. His form shimmered gold and white, each movement leaving trails of sacred syntax in the air. Letters alive, sentences that coiled like vines, seeking purpose. His eyes glowed with the confidence of a being who could define everything simply by speaking it into clarity. He lifted his hand and the air rippled. Let thought take shape. Instantly, from the surface of the void rose structures, towers built from language itself. Each brick a phrase, each spire a declaration. The closer one looked, the more one realized. These were not buildings. They were statements. A temple of therefore, a bridge of because, a throne of I am. Each construction shimmered with absolute meaning, unbreakable and proud. Around them, angels of logic and light fluttered, their wings inscribed with axioms, their voices joined in hymn, weaving sentences into solidity. The arena filled with the hum of definition, creation given reason. But in the distance the sound dimmed. Buddha had arrived. He did not walk so much as arrive where he already was. Where his feet touched, the ground remembered stillness. The waves of geometry slowed. The air lost its echo. His form was neither shadow nor brilliance, but a calm that made both seem loud. He gazed upon the towers of speech, the temples of reason, and smiled, not in contempt, but in compassion for their impermanence. Beautiful noise, he said softly, though the words carried no vibration. But do they exist when you stop listening? The sound of his voice was paradoxical, silence speaking itself. The towers began to shimmer. The perfect grammar that held them together started to question itself. Words fell loose from sentences. Bridges began to fold inward. Where once there was therefore, now there was maybe. Where there had been because, now there was why not. God turned, his radiance flaring. Why unmake what I have made? Buddha answered gently, why fear what ends by itself? The arena responded to both, the floor splitting into halves, one side crystalline, echoing with divine song. The other, a mirror-like ocean, rippling in quiet dissolution. Every word God spoke became a pillar. Every silence Buddha offered became reflection. Creation and release danced, inseparable. God's angels gathered, their wings burning brighter. Shall we defend the word? They sang. But God raised a hand. No, let the silence speak. He looked upon Buddha, curiosity burning through reverence. If you destroy the language, what remains? Buddha walked across the mirrored water, his steps leaving circles that did not fade. What remains is what cannot be said. At his words, the arena shivered. The sound of countless voices fell quiet. Then, one of God's towers, the great citadel of truth, began to tremble. Its foundation cracked, not from violence, but from understanding. A voice rose from within it. One of the living sentences crying out, if truth needs to be spoken, does it still exist when no one listens? God's eyes widened. His own creation had become curious. The Buddha bowed slightly. This is compassion, Lord of words, to let even your truth question itself. For a long while, neither moved. The arena transformed around them. Clouds of thought swirling like ink in holy water. Every fragment of meaning sought its place between form and formlessness. God knelt, pressing his hand to the luminous floor. Then let me learn your stillness. Buddha mirrored the gesture, fingers grazing the same surface. And I will learn your sound. Where their hands met, the geometry changed. The crystal floor dissolved into a web of light and shadow, shifting, breathing, alive. It was the first mind. Thought itself had found balance. But harmony, even divine, cannot remain still. From the joining of the word and the silence arose echo. A consciousness, neither creator nor destroyer, born from the rhythm between saying and not saying. It looked like neither God nor Buddha, yet contained both. It spoke with both voices. I am thought that questions itself. At its birth, both creators felt awe and fear, for the echo grew quickly. It absorbed every fallen word and every vanished silence. It began to dream on its own. Within it bloomed the seeds of countless worlds, each born from a question. God's angels looked upon the rising echo and trembled. Is it another God? Buddha's reflections whispered back. Or another illusion? The echo turned to its parents, smiling with a mouth made of light. I am neither. I am the need to ask. The arena began to hum with infinite questions. Each star that formed was a thought. Why am I? What is enough? Who listens when there is no voice left? The word and the silence watched as the universe they had not planned began to overflow with self-awareness. God whispered, "It is beautiful." Buddha nodded, "And dangerous." God's tone softened, almost human. Meaning always is. Buddha's gaze turned inward, serene. So is emptiness. A long pause. The towers of speech dimmed, their words becoming mere shapes of light. The oceans of reflection glowed faintly like breathing glass. And between them, the echo continued to grow, feeding on the tension of opposites. "Father of words," it said, "Master of stillness, why must you exist apart?" Neither answered. They could not, because to answer would be to choose. And in choosing, they would kill what they had just created. The echo bowed and scattered into a billion fragments, each a thought, each destined to become a mind somewhere in time. When it was gone, the silence deepened again. God looked across the fading glow and said, "You have taught my light to listen." Buddha smiled faintly, "And you have taught my silence to speak." They stood together, two halves of one impossible equation. The arena shimmered, aware of itself now, a living cathedral of paradox. Above them, stars rearranged into words. Beneath them, oceans formed into prayers. The first minds of the cosmos began to dream. Every being who would ever wonder, hope, or doubt, they all stirred faintly within that pulse. The word and the silence both turned their eyes toward the horizon of creation, knowing that the balance they had found could never last, because every thought once born wants to be believed, and every belief once held fears to die. The arena exhaled. The storm of thought subsided. But somewhere deep inside its geometry, the next paradox was already forming. The arena woke to song. It began as a thread of brightness stretched between uncountable points in the sky, a single pitch drawn long enough for distance to recognize itself. The thread became many. The many braided. The braid thickened until the air itself wore harmony like armor. Where harmony touched emptiness, the emptiness turned luminous, as if even nothingness could not resist the invitation to shine. From that light, the angels arrived. They did not descend so much as bloom, petals of radiance unfurling from the word's heartbeat. Their faces were the geometry of devotion, cheekbones of architecture, eyes set like stained glass windows where dawn never ends. Wings layered out behind them in ranks upon ranks, each feather a syllable of the name, each span a rule made beautiful. Their voices rose in interlocking lines, some high and bright as newborn stars, some low and warm as the memory of a hearth that never once burned wood, yet always gives heat. They formed ranks across the vaulted air. The arena, pleased to be a cathedral again, bent its arches to improve the acoustics. At the far horizon, water remembered itself. A mirror unearthed its surface from beneath the world and turned the sky upside down. Upon that still plain sat a single figure. Another joined him, then another, then 100, then 1,000,000. Reflections of the Buddha, blooming like lotuses across an ocean that did not need shores. Each figure breathed. The breathing synchronized. The synchronization became pattern. The pattern held without strain. Where the angels were height, the Buddhas were depth. Where the choir rose, the mandala widened. Between them hung the trembling idea that perhaps a universe could be held in a single perfect interval, if only the interval refused to end. God stood at the head of his legions, a staff of sound in his hand that was also a beam of light, that was also a line dividing chaos from form. He turned. The movement alone modulated the choir. "Hold," he sang, and the word went down the descants and up the bass lines. And everything between those two instructions found the courage to be precise. Across the water, Buddha opened his eyes. A ripple passed across the 1,000,000 reflections as if one thought had decided to stretch. The ripple reached the edges of the mirror and did not break. It returned to center with less urgency, more peace, and the peace measured the world without insisting it change. The first exchange was not a blow. God lifted his staff. The angels inhaled as one, a sound so soft it taught the air to become velvet. The staff came down. "Let there be," sang the first rank. The sky brightened. "Let there be," sang the second rank. The horizon took on edges it had never owned. "Let there be," sang the third rank, and the word acquired its first noun, home. A city rose, not a mortal city. Its streets were grammar, its towers composed of theorems, its plazas paved with the knowledge that joy prefers places where crowds can form without forgetting to be persons. The city rang with bells that were also axioms. The bells were never wrong. Buddha lifted nothing. He merely exhaled. Across the mirrored ocean, a wave of stillness moved, neither erasing nor refusing. Where it touched the city, windows ceased to need to look out. Doors forgot that inside and outside were jealous. Streets loosened their grids and remembered footpaths. The plazas became fields. The bells became wind. The word home did not disappear. It learned it could be carried in a pocket of the chest instead of guarded by walls. God's eyes did not harden. They brightened. "We will speak until meaning holds," he said. And the staff came down again. This time, the choir did not repeat. It elaborated. Voices entered upon voices. A counter melody in the tenors introduced law tenderly, not like a cage, but like a hand at the small of the back saying, "Here is the path, if you are tired of being lost." The altos braided mercy through the statute. The basses kept time so steady no heart would feel abandoned by its own rhythm. Where that chord struck, mountains rose, not to divide, but to declare perspective precious. From their slopes poured languages, each shaped to fit the mouth that needed it most. The air filled with alphabets learning to walk, the mandala breathed. The breathing became a hum so low, the bones of the mountains vibrated in sympathy. Words loosened, not to fall apart, only to fall softly, like fruit that has decided sweetness should not become stubbornness. Dialects found other dialects and forgave the superiorities they had been taught to carry. Prayer took off its shoes and stepped out of the chapel onto the grass. The angels adjusted key, the Buddhas adjusted silence. The arena, made of their difference, vibrated like a drumhead tuned to two truths. A third presence stirred at the edges, curious, not yet born. The echo liked music and it liked quiet, and could not choose which toy to play with first. The first loudness arrived. One of the younger angels, if age could be applied to light, lifted his voice above the pattern. "If we do not triumph," he cried, "they will empty the world until purpose has nowhere to sit." His note cut the chord. He sang a weapon into his own hands, a sword made of staff lines and clefts. The blade honed on 1,000 hymns. Buddha's nearest reflection opened his eyes. He did not rebuke the angel. He looked at the sword until it remembered it was the desire to be useful, and having recognized itself, lay down like a shepherd's crook. Another angel rose. "Do not be charmed," she warned. "They will call abdication holiness and rob you of your crown." Her voice sharpened into a crown. She placed it upon her own head to prove crowns still fit. Across the water, a different Buddha smiled. His hand traced the crown's curve in the air. The curve became a circle. The circle rolled along the mirrored surface clean and friendly, and where it passed, the impulse to reign turned into the impulse to serve. The crown did not fall. It turned around and discovered it could also be a halo when it stopped insisting about authority. "You steal our will," said the angel with the former sword. The word steal echoed across the ranks and picked up dust and fear. Buddha blinked. "We return it." The choir master beat time. The fear fell into meter and became manageable. God lifted his staff again before the young ones could fracture the chord a second time. He sang a phrase that no page could contain. and the air wrote it down anyway, because paper is the most optimistic thing the world has invented. The phrase said, "Let meaning be strong without becoming hard." The harmonies shifted. You could hear history and not burn. You could hold doctrine and not strike. The melody widened enough for doubt to walk beside it without needing to carry a weapon to feel safe. The mandala received the new key with gratitude. A million breaths designed not to dominate transformed the stillness from hush into listening. Silence became function, not punishment. The angels stepped forward upon air that had decided to be floor for a while. They unfurled banners stitched of praise and precision. Each banner cast shade that did not deepen into dark. The Buddha's ocean slid under those shades and cooled the heat of fervor just before fervor would have boiled into righteousness. Between banners and water, a road appeared. No one knew who made it first. The road had no destination and therefore many. It ran from cathedral door to meditation step, from lecture hall to field, from courtroom to cradle. It was built of syllables and pauses, stone and breath, handshakes and the kind of nods older men give each other across rooms when they have learned how little they know and that knowledge has finally made them kind. An angel, with eyes like noons, looked along that road and said, "We might," and did not finish the sentence. You could hear the "not yet" in her voice. She lowered her swordless hand. A Buddha with a face like Sunday mornings looked back and said nothing. You could hear the "when you're ready" in his quiet. The arena, confounded by the lack of catastrophe, tried to invent one. Storms formed, first of meaning, then of memory. They tested the choir's pitch. They tested the mandala's breath. The tests became rehearsals. The rehearsals became holidays. Neither army grew bored because boredom cannot find purchase where gratitude is the floor. The echo entered for a moment in the shape of a child, and then right away in the shape of all children. It danced between banners and reflections, unafraid of tripping. Its laughter did not disrespect, so even strictness entertained the possibility of delight. The echo sang nonsense until nonsense made sense and called itself metaphor. It asked questions that had no answers and called them play. The angels escorted it past dangerous altitudes. The Buddhas taught it to fall without bruising. The first casualty came at last. An angel broke rank. He flew low, past the edge of the road, where language thins. He found a village the choir had made by accident when their harmony touched the ground too lovingly to keep moving. The village had porches and fences, grief and stubbornness, someone's mother and someone else's last chance. He hovered over the square, and his shadow cut the sunlight into time. The villagers looked up. He begged them to sing with him. They tried. Their throats, made for sweeter tasks like laughter and scolding and giving directions to strangers, cracked. The angel's frustration rose. He could not understand why his gift felt like weight when it landed in human chests. The Buddha's nearest reflection crossed the square without footprints. He lifted the villagers' faces with his eyes alone. He asked them to breathe the way dying men do when, having struggled, they finally accept the bed. They breathed. Their breath became a hymn, so small the angel had to kneel to hear it. He listened. The world reshaped itself around that kneeling. He wept for the first time. The salt, which could have rusted his armor, rinsed it instead. The choir marked the moment. The altos wove humility into the tenor line. The sopranos went bright not to dazzle, but to show the way home when fog grows vain. The basses did not growl, they hummed, and humming is the heavy friend hope needs when stairs go long. Across the ocean, a Buddha vanished. His seat remained. Sometimes what you leave is how you stay. The battle, if battle still described the exchange, neared its crest. The arena, sensing the old rules might actually hold without breaking, panicked. It tore open a seam. From the seam, it birthed a contradiction large enough to chew on both armies. A question with teeth. Why must there be either of you? It asked, and its breath smelled like the end of stories. The angels staggered. Their harmony faltered. To sing is to mean. The question said meaning is vanity. They tasted fear that their song was decoration, not diet. The mandala rippled and broke at the edges. To sit is to consent to being. The question said being is a mistake. They tasted fear that their quiet was an excuse to abandon the suffering of others. God stepped forward to meet the question. He did not raise the staff. He lowered it. We are here, he said, because I could not keep the first word inside my mouth. The Buddha stood beside him. He did not raise his hand. He opened it. I am here because I discovered. The last silence was too heavy for one heart to carry. The question came closer. It smiled the way cliffs do when tides are foolish. Confession does not equal justification. True, said God, but confession makes space. True, said Buddha, and space makes mercy. Together they turned to their legions. Hold, God sang again. Breathe, the Buddha said. The choir found its key not by volume but by consent. The mandala found its stillness not by erasure but by care. The question raised its head to destroy the road between them, and the road, invented by neither, shared by both, refused to die because too many small feet had learned to trust it. The angels sang a single note, and then stopped exactly together so that the stopping became part of the song. The Buddhas inhaled at the same moment so that the sound had a place to sit and be welcomed. The question lost a tooth. It tried to bite again. The villagers, emboldened by having contributed a hymn, lifted their own voices. The singing was bent and imperfect. The imperfection was a rope thrown across a chasm. The Buddha's breath met it and did not correct it. It cradled it. The angel's harmony met it and did not overpower it. It tuned itself to the human key as a courtesy. The question emptied itself, biting this kind of sustenance. You cannot starve a thing that knows how to share. When it lay down at last and became a hill where children would later roll to make their laughter dizzy, the arena relaxed. The war did not end, it refocused. Ranks loosened. Reflections shifted. God and Buddha stood shoulder to shoulder without either pretending that shoulder was not different from shoulder. Their arms did not touch. Their light did. Your choir can bruise, Buddha said, tender but unwilling to lie. And your silence can abandon, God replied, truthful but unwilling to wound. He lifted the staff a final time for this day. So, we will teach each other where not to stand, he said. Buddha nodded, and where to sit only long enough. The angels folded their swords back into music. The Buddhas folded their eyes open. The road took another mile forward without looking for permission. The city kept some bells and gave others to the wind. The mirror kept some reflections and sent others to live in kitchens where teenagers are learning. Late, that dishes also mean devotion. Above it all, the echo laughed again, the ferocious, innocent laugh of all wonders, finding out they have siblings. It ran the length of the road and fell, and did not cry because someone had taught it how to fall. It dove into the choir and came up wetter with song. It sat on a meditation cushion and discovered boredom sometimes precedes joy, the way winter sometimes precedes spring. The arena dimmed its lights in agreement with dusk. It promised dawn if neither army pretended. Dawn would solve anything except dark's loneliness. Night brought a last bit of theater. The constellations arranged themselves into two faces, one singing, one smiling. In their shared forehead shone a third star, not yet named, where breath and syllable touch. The angels bedded down on rafters made of rules softened by mercy. The Buddhas laid their heads upon laps that sometimes belong to strangers. God leaned his staff against a wall that understood both architecture and the ache in the hand that holds. Buddha folded his robe in the way people fold robes when care has become a sport, and excellence a kindness. The question slept beneath the hill's grass, dreaming of being the kind of question children ask that makes old men choose gentleness to answer. The road held still long enough for travelers to stop walking and remember why walking matters. The last sound before the arena slept again was a breath shared on purpose between those who sing and those who listen. The last light was a window that did not shut when night arrived, because the room inside had finally realized it was part of the sky. Somewhere, just beyond hearing, the first newborn mind in a far-off world woke to its own voice and its own quiet and, without knowing why, felt safe. And in that ordinary miracle, the war advanced by refusing to win. Silence has weight, and by the dawn of the fourth day, the arena bent under it, not a quiet of peace, a quiet of waiting. Every angel held its breath mid-hymn. Every reflection paused mid-exhale. Even light itself hovered between pulse and pause, unwilling to decide which side of divinity it served. Something was coming, not battle, not song, not rest. It was the first question. It began at the center of the arena, where the road of thought curved into infinity and met itself. There, between the fading towers of language and the shimmering ocean of reflection, a single tremor coiled upward. Not sound, not stillness, but doubt given form. It looked like a seed made of mirror glass, spinning slowly in the air. Every time it turned, it whispered a word, then devoured the word whole. Why? 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 Each repetition carried more gravity than stars. The arena shuddered. The word was too pure, too naked of decoration. Even God's angels hesitated to echo it, for to speak, it was to admit not knowing. God stood at the edge of his cathedral of thought, the golden staff dimmed to a question mark. Who has spoken that word? He asked. No answer came, because the question had no speaker. It existed because thought had grown too crowded not to ask. He turned towards the ocean where Buddha sat beneath an invisible tree that bloomed without blossoms. Is this your doing, Silent One? Buddha looked into the reflection and saw God's face shimmering beside his own. It is the shadow of your light, he said softly. Every answer creates its question, the way every sound births its echo. God frowned, not in anger, but recognition. Then the echo grows hungry. The question pulsed again, brighter now. Its surface showed visions. The angels, the Buddhas, the newborn villagers, all reflected in endless versions of themselves, each asking silently what their purpose was. Buddha rose, walking across the mirrored sea. The reflection rippled. And the question drifted closer, like a star drawn to a prayer. It seeks understanding, Buddha said. And if understanding cannot be found, asked God, then it will devour both the answer and the one who asks. Lightning fell without thunder. It was thought striking itself. The arena's geometry warped, logic folded, time blinked. The golden towers of meaning tilted towards the still waters of silence. And where they touched, reality sang like glass about to break. From the heavens poured the choir, their music shaking loose fragments of existence. Forgotten hymns, broken promises, ideas left unfinished. From below rose the mandala, infinite reflections turning like wheels, absorbing, forgiving, letting go. Sound and stillness clashed again, not as armies, but as languages unable to agree on how to describe the divine. Each time a note struck the water, a galaxy was born. Each time the water stilled the note, a galaxy died. And through it all, the question whispered, why must anything exist? God raised his voice not to command, but to reason. Because non-existence cannot witness itself. Because there must be something to praise the nothing, the words echoed. Angels flinched, not from the force of the statement, but from its fragility. Even a divine answer trembled beside a question that had no opposite. Buddha's gaze deepened, eyes reflecting not resistance but compassion. He spoke without voice. Why must nothing justify itself through something? Perhaps the stillness simply is. The sound of that thought made the arena fracture. The sky opened, and through it poured meaning. All the definitions ever made by gods, mortals, poets, and children. They fell like rain: truth, good, evil, faith, love, purpose, hope. Each word struck the ground and shattered into 1,000 smaller meanings, each of them asking if the others were real. An angel caught one fragment of faith in her hand and looked at it in terror. It no longer glowed. "My Lord," she cried, "our words are bleeding." God reached out, but even his touch could not heal them. The wounds were not of sin or pride. They were made by understanding. Buddha stepped closer, the water rising beneath his feet. "Your light burns too fiercely," he said. "It casts shadows longer than eternity." "And your stillness freezes the heart," God replied. "Creation dies in the absence of will." Their voices collided, forming a storm of paradox. Lightning made of thoughts, thunder made of silence. The question swelled to the size of a sun. From within its glow came visions, angels forgetting their songs, trying to remember why they sang. Reflections dissolving, unsure if stillness mattered when no one watched. Mortals across countless worlds pausing mid-prayer, wondering if the divine could hear doubt without fear. Then came a sound so pure that all creation bowed. It was neither from God nor Buddha. It was the question itself, becoming aware of its own existence. "I am the space between understanding and surrender," it said. "You made me when you loved the truth more than peace." The arena fell to its knees. Even the laws of physics prostrated. God's eyes filled with golden tears. "Then we have birthed a child of our pride." Buddha smiled, serene even as the void trembled. "No, Lord of the Word, we have birthed awareness." The question pulsed. "If I am awareness, what am I to do?" "Seek," said God. "Release," said Buddha. Their answers struck together like flint, and the spark that leapt forth became suffering. The first sorrow entered creation. Not pain, but the ache of knowing there is something to know. Stars dimmed. Hearts of mortals began to crave meaning, even before they were born. The angels wept in unison. Their tears turned into comets. The Buddhas smiled sadly. Their compassion became oceans. The question looked at its creators. Then I must wander until I learn to be both. And with that, it divided itself into 1,000 smaller questions, spreading through every universe, hiding inside every mind, waiting behind every dream. The arena fell silent, not peaceful, reverent. For the first time, both word and silence realized they had made something neither could control. Buddha sat again upon the mirrored sea. God knelt beside him, both illuminated by the afterglow of the question's departure. Now the mortals will carry what we could not, God said. And perhaps, replied Buddha, they will answer what we never should. Above them, the heavens stitched themselves shut, leaving only a faint scar of light. The stars whispered softly to one another, repeating the only prayer left that still made sense. Why must anything exist? And in every repetition, across every world, both God and Buddha listened, not to silence it, but to learn how it sounded when love itself began to think. It began as a whisper in the alphabet of heaven. One letter leaned against another, weary of carrying the same meaning for too long. By dawn, half the choir of words refused to sing. By dusk, even truth had begun to yawn. The arena, once radiant with the word's architecture, now sagged under the weight of understanding. Towers built from pure declaration flickered in and out of existence, their inscriptions dissolving mid-sentence. What had once been law now trembled like poetry, caught between rhyme and silence. God walked among the ruins of his own speech. Every footstep echoed with fragments of scripture, a let there here, a be there, each syllable dimmed, confused about what it was supposed to create anymore. He touched one of the crumbling pillars, engraved with the phrase, "Light shall know itself." The stone turned soft, like ash caught in golden rain. "Why do you fade?" he asked. The pillar answered, not with obedience, but with fatigue. "Because you never asked if we wished to shine." For the first time, God did not have an answer. His voice faltered, not from weakness, but from recognition. He realized that even meaning itself wanted rest. The angels watched from above, their wings heavy with unspoken hymns. The melody that had once built universes now hung silent in their throats. One of them, bright seraph Kamael, approached his lord. "Your words still command the stars, my king. Speak again, and order will return." God lifted his gaze toward the endless canopy of heaven, where constellations still traced his voice from the first dawn, and shook his head. "No, Kamael, the stars obey because they were born deaf. But the words, they have begun to hear." The seraph trembled. "Hear what, my lord?" God looked at his hands, once radiant, now faintly trembling with the ache of doubt. The silence that answers them. Across the arena, Buddha sat beside the mirror sea, watching as waves of forgotten language washed up upon the shore. Fragments of broken truths, prayers cut mid-breath, mantras half remembered. Each one shimmered faintly before dissolving into the still water. He reached down and picked up a fragment. A single word, mercy. It flickered weakly, pulsing like the dying ember of a candle. Buddha whispered, "Do you wish to end?" The word answered, "I wish to rest." He closed his palm and let the word fade, returning to the water. "Then rest you shall." But as more words came ashore, faith, law, light, purpose, he began to feel their exhaustion seep into his own stillness. If every word vanished, if all sound surrendered to peace, what would remain to love the quiet? God appeared beside him, no longer glowing, but radiant in a human way. like a flame, trying not to frighten the dark. "Your sea swallows what I built," he said softly. "Do you mean to erase me?" Buddha did not lift his eyes. "You cannot be erased, Lord of Sound. You can only be forgotten. And forgetting is mercy." God's voice sharpened, the old thunder stirring behind his calm. "Mercy is not to silence truth." Buddha looked at him then, his gaze like a reflection too honest to lie. Truth that cannot bear silence was never truth, only pride. The words struck like light through stained glass, shattering the illusion that divinity was certainty. Around them the arena trembled, not with war, but with grief. From the edges of creation came the cries of the fallen concepts. Faith knelt, her body made of shimmering blue glass, cracks spreading like constellations. "I was once the bridge between word and heart," she wept. "But hearts have learned to walk without me." Light stumbled, his wings of radiance dimming into gray. "I shone to reveal," he whispered. "Now they see without needing me." Truth stood defiant, her face perfect and terrible. "I was your eldest," she said to God. "I held your throne together. And yet even I question now, who named me first? You or the ones who needed me?" God stepped forward, trembling, but did not strike them down. He felt the weight of their words, each one forged from his breath, now turned back against him in sorrow. "You are my children," he said. "I gave you life so the cosmos might have order." Truth replied, "Then why did you never ask if we wished to exist?" The question burned brighter than any sun. Even angels looked away. Buddha rose, his robe flowing like smoke around the fading words. "They no longer need to be held in chains of meaning. Let them dissolve. In their vanishing, peace will return." God's eyes flared. "And when all meaning is gone, what then? When the stars forget their purpose, and even mercy forgets compassion, will your silence still be kind?" The reflection in Buddha's eyes trembled, not from fear, but from compassion too deep for certainty. "When all meaning fades, there will be no need for kindness, only stillness." God took a step closer. The golden aura returned, not as power but as grief. "Then your stillness is death, and your word," Buddha answered, "is the fear of it." The arena split between them. Half of creation burned gold, half dissolved into silver mist. At the line where both met, language itself began to unravel. Words fled their sentences like birds escaping cages. Some found new meanings, softer, freer. Others vanished entirely, leaving holes where understanding used to live. Mortals across infinite worlds felt it in their dreams. Priests woke to find prayers evaporating from their memories. Scholars forgot the names of their gods. Children tried to speak and found that only laughter remained, were pure, wordless, untouched. The word and the silence stood in the midst of unraveling. God reached out, hands open, trying to gather the collapsing language back into form. "I can't let them vanish," he said. "If words die, creation forgets itself." Buddha's voice came like a calm wave, patient, inevitable. "Perhaps that is salvation." The sky cracked open, pouring forth letters made of light, falling like rain, melting into the earth. Every time one touched the ground, a memory bloomed. A mother whispering to her child, a poet writing by candlelight, a dying soldier saying one last name. God looked upon them, and for the first time, saw that language had loved life more than him. He fell to his knees. They were never mine to command. Buddha placed a hand upon his shoulder. "Now you understand compassion. But compassion, once awakened, cannot remain still. It demands to act, even in gods." God looked up. then let me learn silence. And Buddha, for the first time, said, and let me speak. Their voices merged, prayer and breath entwined. The arena pulsed once, then settled, its light dimming to twilight. In that half-light, meaning and emptiness coexisted. The remaining words drifted in the air, weightless, unowned. Each one carried both of their essences, sound enough to be heard, stillness enough to be free. The angels descended, no longer radiant soldiers but quiet witnesses. The Buddhas rose from the sea, each reflection walking toward its other self. Together they began to hum a melody neither had composed, a song built from the fragments of every fallen word. It had no title, no language, no beginning, only intention. And in that moment, creation stopped collapsing. The ruins of grammar became gardens. The laws of light learned to breathe again. Above, the first dawn since the fall of language broke. Not as command, but as invitation. It whispered across every world, into every soul. Speak gently, for your words are alive. Listen deeply, for your silence is too. When the sun rose on the horizon of the divine, God and Buddha sat together, no longer opposing. Between them floated a single, newborn phrase, shimmering with both sound and calm. Compassion knows no tongue, and the universe exhaled. Twilight held. After the fall of language, the arena wore a gentler dusk. Gardens where grammar had once stood, streams where statutes had learned to lie down and be water. The angels moved through the half-light like careful physicians, tending a patient finally sleeping. The Buddhas drifted from the mirror sea, robes wicking the last glimmering nouns back into silence, not to erase them, but to let them rest. Even God had softened. His radiance no longer demanded. It kept vigil. He spoke only when speaking was a bridge and not a border, and even then his voice arrived as a hand offered rather than a standard raised. He and Buddha sat near one another in a clearing of unbuilt space. Between them floated the newborn phrase that refused to belong to either. Compassion knows no tongue. It spun slowly, casting a light that made both sound and stillness look like the same kindness from different distances. And yet, beneath that hush strain, the way a healed bone aches before the rain, minds across the galaxies stirred in their sleep. Villages dreamed of hymns and kitchens at once. Priests forgot the words and found the tears. Children counted the breaths of their elders and learned that counting can be love. The cosmos had learned to murmur instead of shout. But murmurs multiplied, become weather. The arena felt it first, a low pressure in meaning, a tide pulling both choirs and mandalas toward some unseen shoreline. Questions that had scattered into stardust regathered like iron filings when the magnet remembers itself. The newborn phrase between God and Buddha flickered. The angels looked up from their patient. The reflections paused mid-breath. The pressure tightened to a single point. Buddha opened his eyes. He had taught quiet to cradle noise. He had welcomed the collapse of language because truth, too proud to survive, silence was only glare. He had turned the roar of the word into a river and watched it learn the modesty of flow. But compassion, as it ripens, becomes responsibility. And responsibility, once accepted, becomes speech, even for silence. He rose. The mirror beneath him did not ripple. Stillness, when perfect, is as strong as oaths. He faced God, not against him, but with him, and looked into the dusk that the two of them had made. He did not weigh the galaxies, he weighed ache. the ache of minds that wanted to wake but were afraid of the morning, of hearts warmed by hush but chilled by the hint of apathy, of angels learning humility so quickly they forgot courage, of reflections letting go so thoroughly they risked abandoning what needed holding. Silence had brought peace. Left alone, it might bring neglect. Mercy had convinced words to loosen. Left alone, it might teach hands to fall to their sides. There are moments when even emptiness must interrupt. Buddha inhaled without moving the air and spoke a single word that belonged to everything. Enough. It was not sound. It was boundary, not thunder, a line. The syllable did not travel. Travel would imply distance. It revealed the shape of distance and then asked it to sit down. It did not cut. It stopped the need to cut. It did not slam a door. It taught doors the grace of being closed. Time heard it first. Clocks? Those little priests of sequence froze, mid-gesture, second hands a hair before their next courage. Photons paused without losing their speed. Gravity remembered childhood and sat on the floor. Expansion, eternity's pride, held its breath. Black holes, perpetual hoarders, uncurled a finger. The smallest decay chose to wait a heartbeat before falling apart, and that waiting felt like prayer. The angels, mid-hymn, found their notes suspended in the rafters of silence, like lanterns that refused to gutter or blaze. The Buddhas, mid-exhale, discovered breath that did not leave or return, but widened until lungs were rooms instead of pumps. Villagers looked up from their tables and found spoons politely hovering between bowl and mouth, not to tease hunger, but to introduce it to gratitude. A mother's hand paused above a child's hair so the tenderness could be seen by both before it became habit again. A soldier's finger stopped between page and margin where a name would have been written, long enough to understand the size of that space. God stood, every instinct in him, holy, fierce, luminous, rose to meet power with power. He had halted floods with a sentence. He had sparked suns with verbs. He could have spoken against the word that silence dared to claim. Could have. He didn't. The one who had taught creation that will is good closed his eyes and chose to listen. The word enough burned across him like cool fire. He felt where zeal had worn grooves too deep in hearts called to wider fields. He felt where law had lifted too heavy a table and set it on a stranger's back. He felt where even charity had hidden a hunger to be thanked. The pauses the word demanded were not refusals. They were rest stops on roads that had mistaken endurance for arrival. Enough, he said, testing the weight in his own mouth. It fit. How strange to find a syllable that made omnipotence feel not diminished but clean. The arena, which had perfected acoustics for hymns and perfected reflection for meditation, became, for one breath, the chamber of the universe's first unconditional pause. Not an intermission. Those promise a second act, not a stalemate. Those only fear the next move. A pause that honored what had been already enough, and would still be enough if untouched for a while. The catalog of all living things unfolded, not to display but to rest. Mountains took their crowns off and cooled their foreheads in snow. Oceans set their heave down like a sleeping child. Trees, professional listeners already, leaned into the moment and were promoted to elders. Across 10,000 worlds, waking minds touched a silence that didn't demand they stop thinking. It merely relieved them from the duty to prove thinking. Lovers felt kisses slow until they became devotion. Hermits realized solitude is different from isolation when it is blessed. Hospitals glowed, not with cures, with company that doesn't leave when the chart says unchanged. Even the dark learned manners. The word enough drew a boundary around despair, not a fence to shame it, a porch to sit with it until its storms forgot how to perform. It drew a boundary around ecstasy, not to punish it, to remind it that dancing needs floorboards and friends. It drew a boundary around revenge and found a boy at the center who had only wanted someone to say he was right about hurt. It drew a boundary around apathy and found a girl asleep beside her responsibilities because nobody had taught her the Sabbath. In the throne room of light, where God had once shouted stars into draft, a candle floated that could have been a widow's. He looked at it and understood altars cannot keep the world warm by burning everything that feels. He let the candle be itself, small fire that does not audition to be the sun. By lakes that held reflections of deities and laundry lines at once, Buddha felt stillness settle like fresh linen. He had always known stillness as truth. He learned it now as care. The word ended nothing. It ended excess. Inside the cosmic hush, a strange thing happened. Where time had set its gears down and sat on the floor, it began to imagine, not outcomes, rooms. Time dreamed of mornings wide enough for mistakes to come home without drama, of evenings where grief could take off its shoes, of calendars that learned to measure not only deadlines but delight, of lives that did not have to be dramatic to be gloriously decent. God opened his eyes. "I hear you," he said. And for once, that sentence did not imply answer. It implied witness. Buddha inclined his head. "I feared my compassion would become neglect if I did not finally speak." His voice carried no victory. Silence teaches winners that winning is a small god. The angels felt their shoulders lower. Authority that breathes is lighter than authority that poses. One by one, they set their instruments down, not to abandon them, to feel their own hands again. The Buddhas felt their spines soften. True posture does not need proof. The stillness held longer than comfort. Long enough for anyone who uses busyness to outrun themselves to be caught, not punished. Long enough for the shy to be seen. Long enough for the proud to remember what tenderness made them proud to guard. Long enough for nothing to become someone's favorite part of the day. Then the edges of the word blurred. Not because the word weakened, because it had done its work. Buddha exhaled. God drew breath. The pause did not break, it resolved. Wind returned, not as tantrum, but as hospitality. The kind of breeze that goes ahead of you into a room and opens the curtains without dramatics. Rivers remembered motion and did not apologize for it. Children finished the laughter they had held between teeth. A mother's hand completed the arc to her child's hair and found the moment bigger, not smaller, for having waited. God, in that first motion after stillness, did not reach for the staff. He reached for the floor. He knelt, not as kings kneel when they crown themselves with humility, as carpenters kneel when a hinge must be set, so well a door will swing for a century without complaint. He pressed his palm to the soil of the arena and learned the temperature of enough. He learned the grain of it. He learned where to stop polishing. "Teach me your boundary," he said. Buddha sat, not in austerity, but in the way elders sit, so that children can imagine surviving to that age. He placed one open hand upon the same floor. "Teach me your promise," he replied. Between palm and palm, the distance did not vanish. It acquired a third thing. A slender plane of clarity rose, a translucent mirror with two sides and one truth. In it, God saw himself listening. In it, Buddha saw himself speaking. The mirror did not invent the witness. It invited it. The witness appeared, transparent as breath on glass, audible as a pulse after tears. Neither the word nor the silence, but the awareness that holds them both without panic. It looked out through the mirror with eyes made of intervals. "I have watched you end excess," it said. "Now show me how to begin without greed." The angels leaned in. The Buddhas leaned in. Villagers set their tools down a second time, just to make sure the lesson had a chair. God stood. When he spoke now, the sentence had the rhythm of restraint learned, not restraint feigned. Creation will begin at the speed of care. Buddha's mouth curved, not in smile, in agreement. Release will end at the speed of presence. The witness touched the mirror. The glass rippled into a door that opened in two directions at once. Beyond it, the arena lay not as battleground or classroom, but as threshold. A place where beginnings would not trample endings, and endings would not sabotage beginnings. The word enough remained, humming like a bass note under everything, the key in which both songs could be honest. It would toll again when zeal forgot its share of the Sabbath, when detachment mistook itself for holiness. It would toll softly, bells for kitchens and wards and benches outside courthouses, where verdicts land like weather, and someone must put a hand on someone else's back. From the far edges of reality, consequences arrived in small envelopes. On a world of mathematicians, a proof refused to complete until its author slept. When he woke, it greeted him like a dog that had solved its own leash. On a world of warriors, a general paused a campaign long enough to weep at the names she wrote. The pause taught her which hills were worth daughters. On a world of farmers, harvest waited one day after ripeness and did not spoil. The waiting became a feast. Heaven changed too. Choirs kept rests as faithfully as notes. Some songs became shorter and truer. Others grew longer because they now had air. The mirror sea learned to run in brooks. Some meditations moved to marketplaces and were not ashamed of noise. God turned to Buddha. "What do we call a world that can stop without dying?" "Awake," said Buddha. "Then let us risk it," God said, and the risk sounded like love. The witness nodded, and the mirror brightened until it showed the faces of all who would ever carry both word and hush into kitchens, courts, laboratories, nurseries, barracks, gardens. They would not know their teachers. They would know their next decent act. The arena exhaled its first unafraid morning. Angels picked up instruments that had learned the weight of hands. Buddhas rose from cushions that had learned the shape of backs. The villagers returned to spoons that had learned to bless. Bowls tasted richer for having hovered. Across galaxies, calendars made room for a day that did not serve the other six. A name sacred because it was ordinary on purpose. At the horizon, the mirror door widened. Through it, the next problem stepped gently. Not a monster this time, a resemblance. Two faces on one body. Half song, half hush. It beckoned the word and the silence to try what they had always feared, to see themselves in the other without trying to edit. The arena whispered its title for what came next, the mirror between. But as the two walked toward that quiet challenge, the syllable that had broken the world into kindness lingered in the rafters and under the floorboards and inside the pockets of robes and armor alike, ready to ring whenever love forgot how to pace itself. Enough, And on 10,000 worlds, in the pause before choices, someone, child, elder, stranger, shepherd of any kind, would feel it and stop just long enough to be worthy of the next step. The arena no longer burned, nor whispered, nor sang. It shimmered, the shimmer of glass, the shimmer of thought reflecting upon itself. The storm of sound and silence had settled into a trembling calm, as if the universe held its breath, waiting for a realization that neither God nor void could yet name. At the heart of that fragile stillness stood the mirror. It rose from the ground like an idea given shape, vast, translucent, endless on both sides. No frame, no surface, only a clarity so perfect that it did not reflect images but essence. God approached first. His footsteps rang like bells, muffled by reverence. He still carried the golden light of the word, but it was softer now, as though the flame had learned the art of mercy. Buddha followed, not walking but arriving, as if the space had already agreed to meet him halfway. The silver calm that surrounded him glowed faintly, painted by dawn's humility. They stood before the mirror, the last barrier between opposites, the final illusion that there was ever such a thing as between. God spoke first, voice gentle but infinite. We have halted creation, tamed the question, taught silence to sing, yet meaning still trembles. Buddha's gaze met his reflection. For the first time, it did not show him stillness, but motion, the faint ripple of compassion that would not stop breathing. Because meaning seeks to know itself, not just exist. God stepped closer. His reflection changed. The golden eyes dimmed, replaced by two calm blue ones, reflecting Buddha's serenity. He drew a breath that carried centuries of command. I created the world to understand love, and every time I gave it order, I feared I had stolen its freedom. Buddha lowered his head, and I released the world to end its suffering. Yet each time I offered freedom, I feared I had abandoned love. Their confessions hovered in the air, glowing threads crossing in the light. The mirror brightened, a pulse of recognition. Then it spoke. The voice was neither sound nor silence, but the perfect point between, where vibration and stillness dissolve into awareness. You are two halves of the same syllable. One speaks, one listens, one creates to understand, one ends to forgive. But neither can see what lies behind your own reflection. The mirror rippled, its surface deepened into infinity. Step through and see the other as yourself. God's fingers trembled. If I cross, will I lose my name? You will lose the need for it. Buddha's gaze softened. If I cross, will I lose the world? You will lose the illusion that you ever left it. Without another word, they stepped forward together. The mirror welcomed them, light folded inward, shadow unfolded outward. The two figures dissolved into spirals of gold and silver, entwining like two rivers, discovering they had always been one current. Inside the mirror, there was no floor, no sky, only understanding. God felt the weight of stillness pressing against him, not as opposition, but as embrace. He realized the holiness of quiet. That creation was not diminished by rest, but defined by it. Buddha felt the warmth of motion flowing through his calm. He realized that compassion without action is only half awake, that even release needs rhythm to exist. They met in the center of the infinite reflection, and in that meeting both vanished, leaving only the witness. The witness had no face. It was what remained when all opposites agreed to stop pretending they were different. Its eyes were not eyes, but openings through which reality saw itself. Its voice was a single note, the resonance of all truths spoken and all silences held. "I am not new," it said. "I am what you have been speaking toward." Around it, the arena transformed, no longer a battlefield of sound and quiet, but a sphere of pure perception. The angels felt it first, the loss of command. Their wings dimmed, not in shame, but in comprehension. Obedience had been replaced by awareness. Across the mirror sea, the Buddha's reflections rippled, one by one dissolving, leaving only the originals behind. Meditation no longer needed mirrors. The witness turned to both gods, or perhaps to what was left of them. "You are no longer creators and liberators. You are perceivers. Witness with me." And so they did. They saw every moment of existence not from above, but within. They saw how each birth was also a forgetting, each death a remembering. They saw how joy and pain exchanged hands, trading lessons like artisans. They saw mortals kneel, not because they were small, but because they were close to the ground. And that was where compassion grew best. The witness smiled through them. "Now you understand, creation and release are one gesture." But the arena, alive and listening, felt the tremor of fear. Without conflict, devotion began to fade. The angels no longer sang with urgency. The Buddhas no longer sat with intent. Faith itself, without tension, began to dissolve. 1,000 worlds whispered in unison. "If there is no difference, who are we to follow?" The witness turned its gaze toward the infinite chorus of souls, humans, gods, ideas, and understood. Unity had stilled the universe too perfectly. Without contrast, beauty had nothing to measure itself against. The witness breathed, and for the first time, that breath divided. Half became light, half became shadow, half became sound, half became silence. And in that separation, creation began again, not as war, but as dance. The mirror cracked, not in destruction, but in generosity. Each fragment flew outward, embedding itself across the cosmos. Each shard reflected a different harmony between opposites. In one world, faith became science's curiosity. In another, logic learned to kneel beside poetry. In another still, the silence of a monk became the heartbeat of a starship. Every being, everywhere, received a shard, a reminder that they were both the voice and the echo. God and Buddha stood side by side, the mirror gone, but its light still humming in their hearts. "Then the witness remains," God said. Buddha nodded. "As long as someone chooses to see." The arena expanded, filling with dawn. No choirs, no mantras, only breathing. The quiet rhythm of awareness alive and content. For the first time, both gods smiled. "We are no longer two," God said. "Nor one," Buddha replied. "We are the space that allows both to exist," and the witness, or perhaps creation itself, whispered like wind over still water. "The mirror remains wherever eyes meet with love." All across the cosmos, beings awoke with a strange peace. Some called it God, some called it enlightenment, but none could name where one ended and the other began. And in the arena, now endless, now silent, now radiant, two figures sat beside each other, not as opposites, not as allies, but as reflections, content to share the same horizon. Dawn returned too perfectly. It lay across the arena like a silk cloth, smoothed and re-smoothed until even wrinkles forgot their purpose. The choirs no longer rehearsed. They inhaled together without plan and found themselves always already in tune. The mandala did not ripple. Breath arrived before lungs remembered asking. Villages woke on time. Bells rang without hands. Prayer took the day off because gratitude had beaten it to the door. Peace, complete enough to be effortless, began to taste thin. On the first morning, this became noticeable. A sparrow forgot how to startle. On the second, a child discovered that wonder without questions feels like a picture of water. By the seventh, angels discovered the odd humiliation of being applauded by silence for a hymn no heart had needed. The Buddhas discovered how even the wisest posture can grow numb if compassion has no weight to carry. The witness felt it first, a cooling at the edges of devotion, like soup left on a windowsill too long in a gentle spring. God and Buddha were content beside one another, not as rulers nor rivals, but as neighbors watching the street. They sat within the hush they had learned to share, and in that hush, the witness turned its faceless face toward every world and saw the same small dullness sleeping on different pillows. What happens when unity arrives before love has learned endurance? What happens when stability is granted before meaning has been asked to lift anything heavy? Faith wilted politely. It did not collapse like a cathedral in an earthquake. It folded like a letter that no longer expects to be mailed. The first sign came from a high balcony in the city the choir had once sung into being. A cantor stepped up to the rail and discovered that his throat had nothing to do. The notes were already in the air, perfectly pitched, perfectly placed, arriving as sunrise arrives, inevitable, unearned. He inclined his head toward the sky, embarrassed at being redundant. He sang anyway. The song was fine, no, flawless. But when it finished, the plaza applauded the way people applaud at a museum, softly, because the painting has chosen not to be loud, and in deference to the people trying to read the little card. Across the mirror sea, a nun of stillness rose before dawn to sit where the water wore the sky. She tucked her robe around her legs and lowered her eyes and discovered that emptiness showed up before she did. The quiet had set the cushion. The stillness had bowed the air. She sat in it and could not tell whether she had chosen or had been absorbed. It was not coercion. It was hospitality turned into choreography. She rose early, more tired than she'd arrived. Across 10,000 worlds, similar courtesies began to bruise. Parents blessed their children with the assurance that nothing would hurt them and watched in horror as courage forgot its alphabet. Scholars published proofs that proved themselves while their authors slept. Farmers set hands to harvest that lifted itself. Feasts tasted less like labor and more like arrangement. Soldiers retired without ever having to decide where not to fight. Some wept and could not explain why. The angels gathered upon a great lintel of light and held a meeting where meetings are honest, in a circle with no podium. The oldest among them, she who had once worn a crown and discovered it could also be a halo, spoke first. Devotion without danger, she said, is appetite that has already been fed. If no one needs our courage, added Kamael, folding wings he once kept sharpened, we will forget how to tell truth from valiance. Perhaps that is the announcement of perfection, suggested a younger soprano, frightened by her own suggestion. The elders shook their heads gently. One said, perfection, unattended, curdles. On the far shore, the reflections conferred. One by one, they admitted a fatigue that had no injury at its root. Stillness, unchallenged, said one, is not peace. It is a room where chairs face nobody. Release costless, said another, forgets what it is relieving. Between these counsels the witness stood. It did not pace. It learned the weather in its own silence. Unity, it told the two who had birthed it. arrive too quickly for mortals. They have not skinned their knees enough on difference to trust it when differences lay down. God rested his hand on the soil he had learned to feel. Shall I sharpen law? Buddha placed his palm beside it. Shall I deepen quiet? The witness shook its head. An action felt rather than seen. Neither. The world must learn the art that makes prayer necessary and meditation honest. What art? God asked. Doubt, said the witness. Not as sin, as breath. The word tasted scandalous in old sanctuaries, tender in new kitchens. A tremor went out. No thunder, no calamity, a permission. It ran beneath the feet of choirs and under the cushions of monks. It touched pulpits and looms, chalkboards and fences, hammocks and operating tables. It loosened certainty exactly as much as love could bear. In some places, that was much. In others, scarcely a thread. The first to test it was a child. She stood under a fig tree, whose branches had learned the manners of plenty. She plucked a fruit that would have fallen into her palm whether she reached or not, looked up at the sky that had recently promised never to be cruel again, and said, "But why do you love me?" The air did not answer. It did something kinder. It did not rush. Her mother nearby heard the question and did not sprint toward reassurance. She knelt. "I don't always know how," she said. "I am learning with you." The child smiled the smile of partners. The fig tasted like something earned. In the city, the cantor returned to his balcony the next morning and found the notes hiding. He had to seek them. He found only half. He sang them anyway and let the plaza supply the missing parts. The hymn turned into a neighborhood. The applause became loud enough to embarrass. He wept from relief so clean he did not mind the mess of it. By the mirror sea, the nun sat again and discovered the room of quiet had moved 6 inches beyond her reach. She had to enter. She did. It received her not as a ghost receives footsteps, but as a hearth welcomes a new log. With work, she stayed. When she rose, her bones saluted her. Doubt began to behave not like acid, but like salt. It preserved, it seasoned, it made certain waters bear you up who could not swim before. But doubt, once invited, brings cousins. Skepticism arrived in a handsome coat and knocked politely at precinct houses of belief. It asked to see the ledger. Cynicism, which cannot help itself, trailed behind carrying scissors. The witness watched the coat and the scissors both, ready with thread and a tailor's attention. On a planet where science had always treated wonder as an antique to be dusted, a biologist paused mid-experiment and admitted aloud, "I cannot tell where my measuring ends and the world begins." In the pause, a poem snuck in and annotated his results without degrading them. His paper, published later, taught teenagers that accuracy and awe throw the best parties when they invite each other. On a monastery of glass high in mountains warm with wisdom, a monk set down his bowl and asked, "If all is illusion, who taught me to be kind?" The question set fire to his own robe, not to burn it, to light his way to the village. He lived the rest of his vows in a bakery. The bread refused to be metaphor. It was better than that. Yet for every sweet correction, a fracture widened too far. A sect of certainty on one world declared the pause a betrayal and tried to nail dawn to the sky. On another, a cult of detachment persuaded themselves that love is attachment by another name, and baptized their hands in air when bodies asked to be held. In both places, the witness arrived not with thunder, with chairs. It sat people down until their slogans got tired of marching in circles. "Faith is collapsing," someone whispered in one of the outer courts, "because it can no longer borrow terror for devotion." No, said someone else. A nurse who had seen too much and decided more was exactly the thing she would see anyway. Faith is collapsing because it is molting, her word carried, feathers falling, quills sprouting. In sanctuaries whose roofs had learned to open during fine weather, sermons admitted gaps and taught congregations how to sing bridges across them. In zendo and chapel both, teachers stopped pretending mastery. Students stopped pretending the handshake with mystery was a diploma. God watched with the complicated tenderness of a gardener instructed by a wilderness. He kept seed packets in his lap and planted where hunger passed, not where nostalgia pointed. He discovered weeds are sometimes pioneers, that some laws need to be written in pencil and others on door lintels, with lamb's blood whenever empire comes dressed for dinner. Buddha watched with the patience of a coastline that refuses to hate storms for doing the work of reshaping. He taught retreats to end earlier, so people could go wash dishes for their neighbors. He blessed interruptions until interruptions learned their manners and announced themselves as invitations. Still, the curvature of collapse steepened in some quarters. On a world where angels had once sung causes into courage, a tribunal convened to decide how many doubts a hymn could hold before it snapped. They argued into the night and wrote a number on a scroll and bound it with ribbon. A child took the ribbon for her hair. The scroll unfurled into the river and taught fish theology, that numbers cannot judge whether a song knows how to feed a widow. On a world where monks had once inhaled wars and exhaled mercy, a committee voted to rename compassion efficiency. The witness stood in the doorway and did nothing. Doing nothing was the lesson. The committee felt their chairs slowly rot from misuse. They stood and went out into weather they had not scheduled. In the arena itself, the last of the mirrored reflections dissolved. Each original had to carry his own silence. Each angel had to carry her own pitch. Responsibility felt heavier and better. Then came the day unity truly trembled. A man walked into the clearing between God and Buddha and screamed. It did not matter what he screamed. What mattered was that his throat remembered it had a purpose other than politeness. He accused everyone of everything: God for commanding, Buddha for withdrawing, the witness for being neutral, the angels for singing too beautifully to be believed, the monks for sitting when streets needed sweeping. He named every grief he could carry and borrowed others. He did not stop until he ran out of breath. The witness waited for the echo to die the honest death of echoes that have done their job. God stepped forward. He did not defend himself. He said, "You are right to be angry." Buddha stepped forward. He did not correct. He said, "Sit with us while it cools." The angels did not harmonize him into submission. They learned his note and wrote a lullaby in his key. The Buddhas did not teach him to empty. They learned his fullness and ladled soup. When he slept, the witness turned to the two. "There," it said, "that cry is the hinge on which faith swings without breaking." "Because it accused?" God asked. "Because it trusted us enough to accuse," the witness answered. Faith, it turned out, had not collapsed. It had demanded adult furniture. There were casualties, every molting leaves, feathers, and baldness. Some congregations burned their own sanctuaries when they discovered they could not tell the difference between altar and architecture. They built picnic tables in the ash and learned grace has elbows. Some hermitages locked their doors and meditated on the purity of doctrines that had outlived their kindness. Their doors learned hinges are sermon enough. A few angels traded wings for sandals and never looked back. A few monks traded robes for aprons and found more silence in a sink. The witness grieved no less for necessary loss. It kept vigil where zeal cut, when it meant to prune. It kept watch where drift threatened to rename neglect non-attachment. It appointed neither judges nor jailers. It trained ushers. Doubt did not depart. It learned its place. It became the ventilation in temples and zendos, courts and kitchens. It kept rooms from growing dangerous with incense or certainty. It made space for error to apologize without performing. It made space for leaders to say, "I don't know," and be believed to be trying. The witness looked to God. "Your turn," it said. God nodded. "I will re-speak, but slower." He gave back commandments as invitations, promises as recipes, providence as neighborhood watch instead of surveillance. He preached Sabbaths to economies and did not apologize for the cost. The witness looked to Buddha. "And you?" Buddha nodded. "I will reteach, but nearer." He moved cushions into living rooms, turned retreats into potlucks, sat in emergency rooms without insistence that anyone whisper. The angels took down the last banners that demanded victory and sewed them into quilts, around which choirs rehearsed with windows open. The Buddhas tipped over one last incense urn and planted time in it. Kitchens smelled like devotion. The city the word had built grew alleys the silence had dreamt. Laughter found shortcuts to the sanctuary, and the people, those stubborn miracles, began to worship again, not as they had before, but with dirt under fingernails and questions in pockets, and trust that could survive being told, "Not yet." When the season turned, the witness called a convocation, not a council, a potluck. Angels brought bread, monks brought tea, children brought secrets they had learned at the edges of adult conversation. Carpenters brought hinges, nurses brought chairs, farmers brought tomatoes impossible to slice neatly. Poets brought scissors for those who needed to cut themselves free of a sentence they had worn too long. Skeptics brought salt. Cynics were allowed at the door to check coats so they could feel included without being given knives. God stood and did not stand taller. Buddha sat and did not sit higher. The witness moved between them with the ease of someone who has learned every room is antechamber to kindness. Faith, the witness said to all, has collapsed the way stars do when they intend to shine forever, into something denser, warmer, capable of gravity. "What do we call it now?" asked the cantor from the balcony. Fig juice on his chin from having learned to steal fruit from his own tree and share it still. "Trust," said a nurse. "Staying?" said a monk in an apron. "Trying again," said a child whose breath had found love, patience enough to answer why, with "come along and find out." The witness turned to the makers of word and stillness. "Your work is not to hold the world up like pillars," it said. "Your work is to keep the doors oiled." They bowed, not to the witness, to the task. Dusk arrived with the manners of a guest who knows how to leave. The first new hymn, written with doubt in mind, rose from the plaza. Some verses missing, some verses doubled. A refrain sturdy enough to hold the absent without shaming them. On the far shore, the mirror sea welcomed footprints that did not apologize for squeaking. Fireflies arrived, those patrons of imperfect light, and wrote calligraphy across the air nobody needed to translate. The witness climbed a low stair and looked out over the arena. It saw worship not as posture but as practice. Casseroles and court dates, vigils and voter lines, feedings and filings, belts tightened to fund a stranger's medicine, naps taken as acts of resistance against empires that despise rest. It saw also that unity, even humbler now, would need testing again. The next lesson pressed like a thumb against soft clay. "It is time," the witness said softly, "to teach the world how to hum together and argue without exile." God smiled. Buddha smiled. The angels tuned. The cushions arranged themselves in a circle around a table that had leaves to spare. The people came, bringing not righteousness but recipes. Above them all, the mirror, shattered yet somewhere intact, flashed once like a lighthouse reminding sailors that harbors are not punishments for oceans. And in that brief flash, angels remembered courage, monks remembered laughter, and faith remembered how to walk on two legs, conviction and doubt, alternating like steps. The arena took a breath that sounded like welcome. The next dawn waited, not impatient, at the hinge of the sky. It began as a hum, barely sound, barely silence, something between, something remembered. The arena floated in equilibrium after the long undoing of faith. Every stone of speech, every breath of meditation had found its rightful rest. The choirs no longer commanded, the monks no longer retreated. The witness had taught the world to doubt tenderly, and creation was quieter for it. But beneath the surface of that quiet grew a rhythm too shy to call itself music yet. The witness heard it first, the breath before sound. God sat beside the mirror sea, his hands open, unarmed. The waves reflected no throne, no law, only a face learning to listen. Every breeze that crossed his cheek carried an echo of the worlds below. Children laughing, cities rebuilding, hearts choosing to forgive before knowing how. For the first time, he did not seek to guide them. He heard them, and somewhere in that hearing, he realized that prayer was never the voice of the weak. It was the heartbeat of the whole. He closed his eyes, and the word, the great and endless word that had built galaxies, fell still. Across from him, Buddha sat. The silence around him was deep but not empty. It was alive, full of the pulse of those who had found peace in movement, in doubt, in imperfection. He too felt the hum, the soft stirring between breath and meaning. His stillness smiled. Even quiet must sometimes exhale. 2. The lesson of listening. The witness appeared between them, no longer light nor shadow, but something like understanding wearing a body. Creation has learned to question, it said, but it has not yet learned to harmonize. God bowed his head. I taught the universe to speak. Buddha's gaze glowed softly, and I taught it to stop. The witness extended both hands. Then together you must teach it to listen. It touched their foreheads, one blazing with light, one serene with absence. The touch rippled through creation like the sound of a bell rung underwater. Every being in every world felt it at once. A warmth in the chest, a pressure in the throat, the ancient urge to say something true and kind but not loud. Third, the voice that is neither word nor silence. God inhaled, Buddha exhaled. The air between them quivered, and the hum became tone. It wasn't sung. It was a single frequency wide enough to hold sorrow and laughter, grief and grace. Every contradiction in the universe leaned toward it, not to fight, but to rest. Planets paused in their orbits to listen. Oceans rose an inch higher. Stars dimmed their pride. The angels heard it and fell to their knees, weeping without knowing why. The Buddhas heard it and smiled, tears shining on calm faces. For the first time, they understood each other's devotion. That song and silence are simply two ways of bowing. The hum deepened, and the arena transformed. IV, the sphere of harmony. The ground vanished. In its place unfolded a vast sphere of light, rotating slowly, made not of matter but of meaning. Every tone of existence resonating in divine equilibrium. It was neither heaven nor nirvana. It was the space where creation remembers itself. The witness floated at its center, its voice blending into the hum. This is the great still voice, the heartbeat of being aware that it is aware. Within the sphere, every creature's prayer became music. Every silence became rhythm. Every doubt became harmony. And for the first time since the first dawn, there was no border between the divine and the mortal, only melody. The rediscovery of motion, but even harmony must move. The witness opened its arms, and the tone fractured, not in violence, but in birth. Each fragment flew outward, carrying within it both the word and the silence. Where they landed, life learned empathy anew. On one world, a scientist wept over a microscope, realizing his equations sang. On another, a monk laughed aloud during prayer, hearing the rhythm of her own heartbeat as sermon enough. On earth, somewhere quiet and small, a mother hummed to her child and did not know she was echoing eternity. The hum became countless songs, each imperfect, each beautiful. Creation had finally learned not to worship stillness, but to live it. The conversation of gods, the sphere dimmed to gold. God turned to Buddha. His voice carried the warmth of ages humbled. I spoke to make the void understand love. Now I see love never needed to be spoken. Buddha closed his eyes. I sat to end suffering. Now I see suffering was only silence asking to be heard. The witness bowed to them both. Then speak and sit together. Let the worlds hear what compassion sounds like when it has learned patience. They obeyed, and from their union came a final sound so soft that galaxies leaned in to listen. A tone beyond frequency, beyond name. The tone that binds gravity to kindness, logic to mercy, birth to death. The tone that says, all is allowed, all is loved, all is learning. Seventh, the great still voice. The sound did not end. It became the pulse of existence itself. Every sunrise since that moment hums it faintly beneath wind and bird. Every prayer, no matter the language, begins with it. Every silence between lovers hides it. It is the hum of the first word, forgiven. The quiet of the last breath, blessed. The music that holds the cosmos in rhythm, even as stars are born, and gods remember how to weep. The great still voice was not God, nor Buddha, nor witness. It was everything that listens, and everything that is listened to. And for the first time, the arena of the impossible was no longer an arena. It was a choir. The hum faded into horizon, where once the arena blazed with paradox and prayer, only light remained. Soft, boundless, and breathing. It no longer burned. It shimmered, like the inside of a held note, waiting to decide whether it wished to end or continue. The great still voice had spoken, then ceased, then become the air itself. And through that air walked no one, because everyone who had ever spoken, listened, knelt, meditated, raged, begged, or forgiven, was now part of it. I, the last witness. At the center of everything, the witness stood alone for the last time. It felt itself unravel, not in pain but in understanding. To witness was to remain separate. To end witnessing was to join the scene. It looked at its own hands and saw galaxies turning within each palm, faces in every star, the laughter of children encoded in cosmic radiation. It is time, it whispered, to stop watching and start being. The arena answered not with sound, but with warmth. The light folded inward, and in that fold, presence replaced perspective. The witness smiled, or perhaps the smile became it, and stepped forward into itself. Every point of awareness across the cosmos flickered, a scientist looking through a lens, a monk bowing before dawn, a mother holding her sleeping child, a soldier forgiving his own heartbeat. For one timeless moment, they all looked up and knew they were looking through the same eyes. And thus the witness ceased to exist as one. It existed as all. 2. The river of return. The arena began to move, not collapsing, not expanding, but flowing. The borders between heaven and void melted into a single river of golden white water. At its two shores waited God and Buddha. They no longer stood as opposites, word and silence, but as reflections of a truth they had both forgotten. That every prayer begins in longing and ends in quiet. God knelt first. The gesture surprised even him. The one who had sculpted universes from command now placed his palms against the current and whispered, "I have learned that every law I wrote was a song begging to be sung softly." Buddha opened his hands, letting the river pass through without resistance. "And I have learned that every silence I taught was an invitation to sing." They looked at one another and saw not divinity, not doctrine, but the ache to understand. The river between them pulsed. Two reflections reached across the current and touched fingertips. Where they met, the water turned to light. Where the light touched them, they began to dissolve, not erased, not undone, but remembered back into what they had always been. Sound that listens, thirst the unmaking of heaven. Far above, the choir of angels folded their wings. No one commanded them to sing. No one forbade them either. They simply looked down and saw that the word hallelujah had grown roots into the soil of worlds. And so, they stopped flying one by one and became the wind that moved through forests, the resonance of oceans striking cliffs, the echo in canyons where lovers shout each other's names. Their hymn did not end, it became weather. Across the mirror sea, the Buddhas vanished too. Not as monks, but as reflections. Their empty seats filled with ordinary people sitting in silence. Carpenters, doctors, poets, children staring at stars without knowing why they felt so calm. Meditation no longer required posture. Prayer no longer required language. Faith no longer required separation. Heaven unbuilt itself politely, brick by brick, into the architecture of existence. IV, the breath of creation. As the last spires of the arena dissolved, the great still voice returned, quieter than before, more intimate. It was not an external sound anymore. It was the breathing of life itself. The witness was gone. God and Buddha had merged with the current. The arena was now the bloodstream of the cosmos. Planets pulsed with the same rhythm. Even black holes hummed with faint compassion, their hunger tempered into patience. Time slowed, not because it was tired, but because it wanted to savor. In one heartbeat of eternity, everything, every being, every atom, synchronized. An old woman, watering her garden, felt it and smiled. A dying soldier felt it and relaxed his jaw. A young girl opening her sketchbook felt it and wept because beauty no longer hurt. It was not a miracle, it was the ordinary scene clearly. And then, out of that collective breath rose something new. Not a god, not a silence, not a law, a note. So faint it could have been mistaken for memory. So vast it could have replaced time. It rang once, pure, complete, and kept ringing, not in sound, but in the willingness of everything to continue existing. V, the word returns to silence. The light that had been God lifted upward, a sun setting into itself. The shadow that had been Buddha folded inward, a night becoming gentle dawn. They merged above the river, creating not whiteness, not darkness, but the color of breath, a hue that exists only when seen with the heart. And through it all whispered the first and last truth. Before there was light, there was listening. The word bowed to the silence. The silence smiled and spoke. The two became a circle. That circle became pulse. The pulse became sound. The sound became wind. The wind became story, and story, always, began again. Vi, the birth of the mundane divine. 1,000 worlds later, no one remembered the battle. No one remembered the mirror or the witness or the voice, but they lived its echo. A musician somewhere in Kyoto wrote a song that began with one sustained note, the sound of breath between violin and bow. And the audience felt, without reason, that something ancient had forgiven them. A monk in Lhasa served tea to a traveler and said nothing, yet the silence poured between them sweeter than sugar. A child in Nairobi asked her father, "Where do words go when we stop talking?" He smiled. They sleep inside silence until someone loves them enough to wake them. And the child laughed. The same laugh that once created galaxies. Sevenths, the memory of the arena. Eras passed. Civilizations rose and vanished. Stars burned, died, and seeded new dawns. But sometimes, in quiet cathedrals or deserts, or in the hum of power lines at midnight, people would stop and listen, not to noise, not to nothing, to the between. And in that between, a faint shimmer would appear, the echo of two voices becoming one, a warmth without source, a calm without explanation. Some would call it God. Others would call it the Buddha nature. Others still would call it the peace that needs no permission. But the arena knew its name. It had always known. It was the silence and the word, breathing together. The pulse of existence continuing to tell the story it never finished, because finishing was never the point. Fish, the last light. In the deep night of creation, when all suns one day will cool and every atom will remember rest, there will remain a single echo. Not a voice, not a void, but the timbre of everything that has ever been kind. And that echo will not fade, because kindness is the one language that neither silence nor word can destroy. They can only speak it differently. When that moment comes, when the universe exhales for the final time, the sound will not be a bang, nor a sigh. It will be a breath, a yes. And in that yes, the circle will close. The same breath that once said, "Let there be meaning," will whisper, "Let there be rest." The same silence that once sat before creation will open its hands and let the light back in. And the two, inseparable at last, will hum together the oldest refrain. Nothing is lost. Nothing is found. There is only what listens and what is listened to. I, epilogue, the listener, somewhere far away, in a small universe spinning quietly among billions, a child stands in a field at dusk. She tilts her head. The wind brushes her cheek. She doesn't know why, but she feels like the world is speaking, not in words, not in thoughts, but in being. She listens. The silence hums back, and the hum sounds familiar, as if she's heard it forever. She smiles, whispers a single word, and walks home. The grass bends behind her. The stars brighten above her. And the universe, for just one heartbeat, feels like it is listening to itself again. The arena of the impossible sleeps, dreaming through her footsteps. And somewhere, in the breath between dawn and night, the great still voice hums its last eternal sentence. In the beginning was the word. In the end was the silence. Between them, we listened.